My grandfather was in the Turkish army, Ottoman army, of course. Then it was not Turkey yet. Ottoman army, and he reached even Palestine. And then when he reached Palestine, he found out there were other Armenians who were fighting against them with the Entente group. So imagine in the First World War, 300,000 were with the Ottoman army, 300,000 were in the other. 600,000 Armenians were cannon fodder for imperialist war in the First World War. This is apart from the genocide that they started. And they started before the First World War because that was an excuse. They started that in 1914, 1913, collecting all the male inhabitants or the Armenians there for the army. And then they left the children to their destiny as such. And they wiped out all the intellectuals, most of them like that. The reason what I'm saying is that my father and mother both were they dared to survive the genocide, and I'm very proud. But they never hated the Turk as a people. They said this is the extra nationalism and fascism of Turkey that did this genocide. And I'm very proud of that heritage, really, of my parents. I am born in Mosul, Iraq, one of the most beautiful cities, but one of the most dangerous cities in the world now, unfortunately. And from childhood, I was interested in lines, sounds, music, all those extracurricular things. And the city that I was born, Mosul, fortunately I attended also the secondary school there. My father's name, he had another name. He had Vahan as a name, but they called him Israel. Because of their Christian heritage, his great-grandmother said that, well, I will call him Israel, and it stuck. And I was called Ben Israel in Iraq. We had no problem with the Arab students there at all, because of my name, because of whatever it is. So that is the ugly thing that it happened afterwards, now that I said that it is one of the most dangerous cities in the world, Nineveh, which was, I remember, we had 2 spring times. It was the city of 2 springs, Mosul, Iraq. We had summer, winter, no autumn. We had 6 months of springtime there in that city. Magnificent. I had a very beautiful childhood as such, but for my interest, when my father noticed there were no teachers of violin, I used to play the violin without any teacher. And strangely enough, I could play anything that I knew as songs. And they invited me in various schools to play as such. But of course, we needed education. And my father decided that perhaps it is time to take all of us to Beirut, Lebanon. And we went to Lebanon in 1952. And that was when I enrolled in high school. That was again, in this time, not an Arabic school. This was an Armenian Protestant high school this time. And then when I was in Italy, it was in a Catholic academy, of course. So I had no problem with this kind of differences of things. On the contrary, it was very enriching to find such relationships. Because I stayed in Lebanon, and then I reached, of course, the American University to study architectural engineering. They didn't have architecture. I loved to study architecture. But because there was no architectural faculty there, they advised me to go to Italy, strangely enough, when they noticed my ability of drawing this and that, sketches. And I did only the first year of engineering there at the American University, and I left to Italy in 1957. But during that voyage to Italy, I met in the ship, because I went through a huge ship from Beirut, Lebanon to Italy, passing through Cyprus. There was a great Iraqi artist, Drubi, who was a professor of the Painting Academy in Baghdad, Lebanon, and I did a portrait of him. So my relations with the Iraqi artists continued even in Italy afterwards. We were nearly 4 years together in Rome with Jawad Salim, who came there preparing his extraordinary monument that he did for the revolution in Iraq. He was casting and preparing all that there. And then Muhammad Ghani, Khalid Rahal, Ibrahim Turkey, all those artists were there. We were all together in the Fine Arts Academy. I wanted to know history so that to understand what's happening in art and every other thing. So that was my interest also in that sense, that I followed to examine. And then, so I'm not historian, I'm an artist, but my passion is history in that sense. That's why I can appreciate what's happening now in Iraq, the horrendous tragedy that they are living, and all those divisions that we find about Sunnis, the Shiites against Muslims, against Christians. This is disgusting. It's a very inhuman attitude. But of course, then I noticed that this is all done because of profit, because of interest, profit at any cost. They want to exploit those countries, and they divide and rule, just like what the Romans did in the beginning. You have to start instruments when you are 5 years old at least, not even before sometimes. But I was already 12, 13 years, my early teenagers. But when I went to Italy, I found my voice. Strangely enough, as if it was, and as a tenor. I started as a baritone, but then they thought that this is a very interesting, it has to be a tenor, and I started as a tenor. And after 2 years, I was invited also in Armenia to sing my premiere performance, or it was with Cavaradossi, the painter, the revolutionary painter in Tosca. That was my first performance in Armenia, in the stage opera of Armenia. But now, in Rome, as I said, nearly 4 or 5 years, we were all together with especially the Iraqi artists. They were really one of the greatest artists of the time, and everyone there, it was there. I mean, Jawad Salim, Muhammad Ghani, as I said, Fatih Drubi, he had studied in Rome before, but of course he went back afterwards. So we were all together, and we were involved also with the Arab Student Society there. All the Arab students, especially the Iraqis, we were part of the Italian Arab Student Society. I was part of it too. Fortunately, I knew Arabic, because most of the Armenians who were in Syria and Lebanon, they did not know as well as we did. Because culture belongs to all humanity. And whenever you live there, it has nothing to do, it belongs to Iraq in that sense. Even the Sumerian and Chaldean, whatever culture it is there. And I felt also part of it, though my parents were Armenian. But basically, my national interest is just to enrich your humanity as such, not to be viciously nationalistic, to hate all the others, or to think that you are the best. That is ridiculous. That is disgusting. Very fascistic it is for me. Because I lived also in Italy, I noticed what is happening there too with the fascist culture, what it did. So my interest in nation's culture, it is because it enriches human culture as such. As an Armenian, as a Christian Armenian, we were allowed not to go to some of the lessons, the religion, when they were teaching in the secondary school. But I asked permission to go and to listen to the Quranic studies, and I am very happy that I did. And they let me do that. I will never forget, for example, the first magnificent paragraph that it's very difficult to find in any other religion. La ikraha fil din, there is no hatred in religion. How many Muslims do follow that? Unfortunately, just like the Christians. Also, in all religions, you have extraordinary humanistic, but also you have very limited aspects of the period that it was produced. So they take only the negative aspect of it without taking care of the positive aspects of what it is, that it belongs to all humanity. When it says, La ikraha fil din, there is no hatred in religion, it doesn't say of the religion of the Muslims. It just, that is a very important phrase it is. But how many Muslims do pay attention to that, and how many Christians do pay attention to their own as such, when it is said that the greatest things is love? You know that when in you have the in the Bible, religion, etc., and the greatest thing of those three is love, etc. But very few people, unfortunately, it's very convenient, because whenever forces try to destroy the culture and create divide and rule atmosphere, they need those aspects of the worst part of the religion also to instigate what criminal attitude they have towards the people. Chances do not come. We have to create that chances, I think so. And artists have enormous task for that. As I said, they open up things to understand better what's happening. Now, I thought it was one of the greatest crimes that they did against the war in Iraq. And I was one of those millions who protested there. And sadly enough, it was a Labour government which gave that, and they did not follow up the advice of the people, and that was ugly and very un-Labourish as such. I think so. And we know the result, what's happened, as if they haven't learned anything from history. Look what happened in Afghanistan. And then afterwards, look what happened in Libya. And then now, that's happening all in the Middle East. They create those criminals in the name of religion, whatever it is, and then they think that they have to fight. But what are they fighting against? Let's not forget, usually they mention that the greatest capitalist country is nowadays, of course, what? It's America, right? Okay. Let's not forget, after the Second World War, America owned 55% of the riches of the world. And it was only how many percentage of America? 7% of the humanity? They owned 55. But now they own barely 20-25%. They have lost, but their military, let's say, industrial complex is so huge, as if they cannot live without war because of the exploitations that they have, and they convince others with them. That is the saddest part of it. And all those people who are collaborating, even it is against the American people. I lived there and I saw, it was during the Vietnam War that I was in America as a Fulbright scholar. And I was very honored because of the American culture thing. I was part of that. But I noticed what they are doing with those protests, even against the war, how they treated the students. I was disgusted, absolutely disgusted. And I always said, those systems are against their own people. It's not because of America, with the welfare of America. What, 50, 60 million people without health care in America? Students, you won't believe now, the minimum or the average yearly payment of university, do you know how much it is? Just have a guess. $40,000 per year. So all the students and the families, they are in debt. And America has 17 trillion debts. And who is paying that? Poor American people. And that example, unfortunately, they are emulating the worst part of America, not the best. They have very good things there. But strangely enough, those systems, they are emulating, especially in England, it is becoming the same thing. They are emulating the worst part of America in the health service, in and education. Even now, it is what? All the students, they finish up with debts. And for what reason? For what reason? And that is unfair to the society itself. When it is like that, of course, then it happens, and continuously it is happening, the destruction of other cultures because of the riches of the world, of the oil, of the minerals, of this and that. In that sense, if the artists, they are aware and they are not only, let's say, satisfying their financial, interest, which is a very, very normal one, because without that you cannot live. But sometimes it becomes so obsessive that as if they are working only for those who have the money to buy the paintings or to have the concert. Even in the opera, how many people can go and pay those prices? And even there, democracy has slipped to the side as such, the world. It has to be changed. When we say we have, because if it is changed, who is going to change? Not only the artists. Artists is part of the humanity. They have, there is that tendency of humanity to change for the better. If that does not exist, so everything becomes useless in that sense. I think so. And because of art being that extraordinary, just like, for example, in science, you examine things, but it takes time to connect the appearance with reality, with the essence. I wish I could say in very easy sentences or words how they can do it. Perhaps every artist, they have to find themselves, himself or herself, how to do it, as a writer, as a painter, or a musician, or whatever activity, even as a scientist, because for me these are the things that in real life you have. It is a very sad situation, but in every, let's say, negative aspect, there are also the positive aspect, because they are open now to various cultures, and that can enrich them to find out new ways of approaching to solve that problem, and that is a positive thing. I am not taking it completely as negative. The negative humanistic aspect I can understand, the tragedy, also because of my background as an Armenian. For centuries they were outside, and all of the world here and there, this and that. But nevertheless, this is the world that we are living. But when we believe, that's why I said about internationalism. Internationalism is, it says that there are cultures, nations who have different cultures. International is the one which respects, and he is involved with that and appreciates, enriches his own nation. It is not a cosmopolitan as such. It is not as if devoid of anything like that. No, the positive aspect of it, that they become much more international as such, and they can find their own way, different ways, and there is no one way of doing those things, I think. And even every artist will find its own way. I wish I had an answer much more properly. We knew that Saddam Hussein was the lackeys of the CIA. I mean, he was in Egypt, this and that. He was brought back, and he became a dictator. Then they ruined him because, also because he suddenly said that now he's not going to follow the petrodollars, and he's going to change this and that. These things happen, and they create those things. And ISIS, who created ISIS? Let's face it, everybody knows now. And they supposedly they are going to fight against it. It's a disgusting aspect of it. Imagine such, and that becomes in the name of religion. In the name of religion, so much atrocities and inhumanity that is unfair, totally unfair. And look what they did. They had supposedly few countries to fight that. Why not the Security Council? That was the place to go and ask of humanity as such to do something against it with the collaboration of the other countries there. But they didn't do that, because their aim is not to solve that problem, to make it worse, and to bring even Syria just like Libya, destruction, everything. You don't have to be with Assad or Saddam, this and that. That is not, that's an excuse for them to ruin those countries, unfortunately. Knowing from my history of the Armenian people, how they deceived. Let's not forget, In the First World War, they knew what was happening in the Ottoman army, all the destruction, and they did absolutely nothing. They collaborated against what was happening in the genocide only after it finished. In the Second World War, when did they open the second front? 1944. 1942 they agreed to do that. They waited 2 years. Why? Because they were hoping that fascism was going to destroy Soviet Union. But it didn't happen. They had to open that. This is the world that we are living, I think. Unfortunately, these are not something that it shows the essence of the things. The appearances are different. Yes, they went there as if they... Well, it was after the Stalingrad battle that they won. I mean, it was everything obvious that it was going to be ruined. But they opened that war in 1944, and the genocide of the Jews had happened. They knew about it. What did they do? Nothing. Afterwards they went. And what did they do with the Armenians? When the Americans were there, they collected most of the Armenians out of their lands and they took them to America. What happened there? Very few Armenians were left in the original Armenian lands there. And this is the process that they are following up. And unfortunately, as I said, I also to my Jewish friends, I said, they knew what was happening, what fascism was doing. It was not at the last moment. How come you did not decide? It was decided 44 because there was an idea there. Yes, we are with peace, but we are in a war because they were fighting against. He had to have the war there, in that sense. Unfortunately, this is what it happened. And in the Second World War also, that is, in the First World War also, especially, when there was this antagonism, they did not want to involve, for example, America. It was very convenient for them to say that, well, because Russia was destroying the Jews and they were very anti-Semites, this and that, and these are the enemies. So they thought that they have to be with the Germans if they are going to fight, strangely enough. But the British and the French thought differently in this sense. Well, they said also the Germans and the Turks and the Ottoman Empire, they have also genocide. And they prepared the Blue Book specifically to convince America, look, these are the enemies. And these are the manipulations that they do. And they play with the life of humanity, of the people who are suffering. And at the end, and as the British Buxton used to say, Armenians says lost more than the entire British Empire in the First World War. More than. As I said, for example, the solution, now that we are thinking of the enormous tragedy of the Middle East, I thought the best way, that's why we have the Security Council. Let's face it, if humanity follows all the agreements, decisions, and the international laws, it will be a paradise, the world that we are living. Do they do now? We have that against this genocide still continues. Are they following? This is it. I mean, we have all those. Humanity has, because of a struggle, they have decided together to have such rules, to have the Security Council. This. But look, even now, why didn't they not follow the Security Council to do something? At least humanity will see that the whole world is against inhuman acts. Not only separate this and that. Even those countries who are doing, they are the ones who are arming those criminals there. So this is the aspect of it. In that sense, perhaps now that you mentioned, I would love to mention that too. Pandora's box is a very important thing in mythology. I think so. It is, but also it becomes much more important if we think, and it makes only logic, if we think of that box to be the human heart. If it is there that the hope is kept, and it should be there, and all that, let's say, malevolent things of the heart, when they escape, they do come from the heart too. But it's good that it makes sense if we think that Pandora's box is the human heart. In that sense, we should not, because all those forces who are destroying humanity, they would love to see human beings without hope. That is their aim, to destroy even that. And we should not let that happen. That hope should be kept, because that is the impetus that gives you. Otherwise, on what basis you have to have? If you don't hope that it will become better, you will never find a solution, because that is not. For what reason? If there is no hope for that. Even if it does not happen now, it will happen for the next generation. That history has its own. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that it will happen, those things? But even the Soviet Union, who would have thought that it will crumble? That's very interesting, because I always say to many leftists that they always mourn that the Soviet Union. Imagine there is no system in the world that without war can go away. They have to fight. But for them, that, let's say, that politics and that humanity of the social aspects that they were living, perhaps they gave them, perhaps it is better to change our life than doing war, because it will be destruction of humanity. If Soviet Union decided, just like the others, not to let that change and to do war, humanity was going to be lost with all the, and we have to thank that they decided even to experience some capitalism, well, whatever it is. But even in that capitalism, it has remained again some aspects of what they had learned before. I hope so, in that sense. For even that, I'm not taking it completely tragically as such. I said that imagine if there was a war, as Einstein would say, the Third World War was going to be stones. Yes, with its horrendous cities, how much destruction it could have been with that war. For what reason? Instead of, well, let's keep humanity. If they want, and interesting enough, those who were on the top of the Communist Party, some of the young communist leagues, they became billionaires. Some of them, they were in there. So they exploited even that ideology there. But nevertheless, humanity was saved because of that war. I think so. That is positive. I think in those terms. So I'm not very dogmatic about it. No, it will not be lost for humanity, because those aspects, even now, look, Greece, Belgium, as I said, every people, they are trying their best to change for better, for more human way of doing things. And that is what they should, because without it, there is not left anymore anything. Recently, you have heard about that, the TTEP, as they say, that the transatlantic agreement. They said, oh my God, if that will succeed, it will be the end of the, because it will just be the economic Ebola of Europe, I think, if that succeeds. Because everything will be destroyed in that sense. Of all protests, everything, if you complain, you have to pay for that. If you do this, you cannot do anything if that succeeds. I wish Europe will realize what will happen, and they will not let. But of course, many people, you have many classes, they have interests. Billionaires you have, and the common people, they always exploit that, unfortunately. But it will change, because if you notice in history, enormous changes has come. As I said, all the legal ways and to do things, if we follow them, it will be a paradise, this world. Believe me. We have that. At least you can have 12 things that you will be surprised. My God, wonderful. Are we doing that? Let's do that. We have already all the means to do that. I think so. But they are not letting, of course, and that is the antagonism, of course.